So recently I just did Christopher Lee's introduction to the character of Dracula, Horror of Dracula. Now we're going to do Eddie Murphy's take on a similar character in Vampire in Brooklyn. So let's go. Vampire in Brooklyn stars Eddie Murphy, Angela Bassett, Kadeem Harrison, and is directed by Wes Craven.
Brooklyn.
Interesting. I've been stabbed and I've been hanged. Even broken on the rack once, but I've never been shot before.
What's up, guys? It's time for a patron request. We're going to do this one for Bronson Wright Wolf. He requested that I do Vampire in Brooklyn. And by the way, I've actually gotten a few requests to do this movie over the years. Glad I finally am doing it. This is the first time I've ever watched the movie, actually. Vampire in Brooklyn came out in 1995. And if you remember, in the 90s, there were just an onslaught of vampire movies. I think it was a prime hotbed for the vampire genre. And you had some really great ones like Interview with a Vampire, From Dusk Till Dawn, and quite a few others. But this one just kind of is lumped in the middle of all that. And you also had Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula. That's the first Dracula movie I ever saw. Saw it in the theater back in 1992, and I loved it. It's a great vampire movie, and I think it, because there's been so many interpretations of the character, this one felt very fresh, and I like that it was set back in that time period. Really cool stuff. And before we dive in, even before the plot synopsis, I want to dedicate this review to Sonia Davis. Sonia Davis was a stunt double for Angela Bassett, and she literally died making this movie. She fell 42 feet. It was an unnecessary death because she actually asked the filmmakers, the crew, hey, are you sure? She asked them like 3 times, and they kept saying yes, yes, yes. So she fell to her death. She bounced on one of those massive airbags that stunt people, they jump onto. We even seen it in like Lethal Weapon. But she bounced off of it onto a wall and then onto the ground, and she was in a coma for 13 days. So, and what makes matters worse is her family was there. Her mother and her 3 siblings were there, and they literally watched her die right there in front of them. Can you imagine that? So, I think there's a lot of stunt personnel that have accidents, and in the worst case scenario, they die on these movies. Directors like Quentin Tarantino, he's constantly tried to push them to the forefront of popularity because, what they do is 10 times more dangerous than what, like say Tom Cruise does, right? They do this shit every day. So, I wanted to just kind of honor our stuntmen for this review, all right? So rest in peace, Sonia Davis. But first off, let's give you a quick plot synopsis. Again, this is pretty much a retelling of the Dracula story, all the way from him arriving on the ship. You have characters in this that are very similar to the main characters in Bram Stoker's Dracula. Angela Bassett is kind of the Mina type character. Kadeem Harrison is like the Renfield. Of course, there are slight variations along the way, and this is an Eddie Murphy vehicle, and he wanted to infuse a lot of his characters and his comedy in this movie.
That evil is good. Let me hear y'all say it. Evil is good. Right?
So that does give it some panache, sets it apart from other Dracula-like stories. I mean, he's not even Dracula in this movie. His name is Maximilian. They never really state that he's Dracula, but they do mention like Nosferatu and the undead and stuff like that. Kadeem Harrison, like I said, he's the like Renfield type character, but I really liked him in this. He is Maximilian's servant, and there's a scene in like a club where he pulls his tongue out, and there's quite a few displays of really fun practical effects in this movie. Some of it works really well, some of it doesn't, like the snake that's in the same scene. You can tell that that's a fake snake. Also, the face makeup, it looks very shiny for some reason, especially when Eddie does like a preacher type character, and then at the end of the movie when he like turns into like the monster version of the vampire. You got this character Justice, who is kind of like the Jonathan Harker. They're not really dating, they're partners in this, him and Rita, played by Angela Bassett. But you can tell that there's some sexual tension there. As a matter of fact, there's even like a sort of a sex scene between the two where she starts becoming a vampire during the scene because she was bitten earlier by Maximilian. And Maximilian, his goal in this is to, I guess, bring her into his life, similar to Dracula and Mina. But she has to come willingly. He can't like force her. Now, let me talk about Eddie Murphy a little bit, because I am a massive Eddie Murphy fan, especially the output that he did in the 80s. I will sing his praises as a comedic genius. I used to listen to Delirious back to front. I had the cassette when I was young, and man, I pretty much had it memorized. I used to listen to it so much. And Raw, but also Beverly Hills Cop. And 48 Hours, I think, is highly underrated. I've probably watched 48 Hours just as much as I've seen Beverly Hills Cop. I love the first two Beverly Hills Cop movies. Not so much the rest of them, but the first two are absolute classics. And I know, that Stallone was supposed to be in the first Beverly Hills Cop. And this is a situation where I think the role suited Eddie Murphy so much better. And also Angela Bassett, massive fan of her work. What's Love Got to Do with It might be one of my all-time favorite biopics. When she played Tina Turner, she won the Oscar for the role. Her performance is just magnetic in that movie. And it's another one of those biopics that I probably watch more than other biopics. Another one would be Control, about Joy Division's Ian Curtis. I watch that one constantly too. But yeah, I like a biopic that doesn't follow the same template that so many of them do. Like, I'm a big Queen fan, but I thought Bohemian Rhapsody was a pretty much by the numbers type of biopic. What's Love Got to Do with It was almost horrifying, just because of what she had to go through with Ike Turner. But jumping into what I really liked about this movie, Wes Craven directed this, and I didn't even realize that until I watched it this time. By the way, got it for $5 off of Amazon Prime. Because I don't have the DVD or the Blu-ray, and I was like, I guess I'm going to have to rent it, and then for $1 more I could buy it. It was a sale, so if you want to get it, I would get it, because remember, I got another movie that I just reviewed for $5, and then somebody told me it went up to $10. And that was Horror of Dracula, another vampire movie. So yeah, when I tell you about these, you got to jump on them, okay? $5 I got this movie for, and it looks great. Freaking Paramount. This was Eddie Murphy's last Paramount movie too, by the way. I'm all over the place, but since I'm talking about Eddie Murphy, another movie that I would highly recommend that nobody ever talks about is Metro. Michael Wincott, one of my favorite villain-type actors, top dollar from The Crow. He was in that movie. But nobody ever talks about Metro. It came and went. It bombed royally at the box office, but I really dig Metro. So check it out if you haven't. Now, going into a little bit of the backstory on this, because Wes Craven originally wanted this to be more of a straight-up horror vehicle, even though Eddie Murphy was going to be in it. Eddie Murphy only took this role because he was trying to get out of his contract and he was trying to get the rights to Nutty Professor. His heart really wasn't in the role all the way through. And I'll even say right now, as a vampire type performance, I don't think Eddie Murphy does anything special in this role, if I'm being honest, especially when I compare him to his previous work. I already talked about that earlier in the review, and I'm a massive Eddie Murphy fan, but I think certain actors just aren't the right fit for certain roles. He's not bad, he's not horrible, but he's no Gary Oldman, right? But I do like how this is kind of like a blaxploitation type film. I've been really wanting to get into like 70s black cinema. I've really been into a Pam Grier mode. I just rewatched Jackie Brown a couple weeks ago. My God, I love that movie. And it made me want to go back and watch some of her 70s films. I just love the look of 70s films anyway. And, you can pretty much easily get me in just with the way those movies looked, how gratuitous they were, and just that B-level, low-budget feel. I'm a sucker for that stuff. But this is a slick-looking movie, and I think you can take the good from that and the bad from that, right? If I'm doing a vampire movie, I kind of want it to have a grimy type of feel, a scary, ugly type of feel. Even Interview with the Vampire, as slick as that movie was, it had some creepy, scary type shit. Tom Cruise really earned his keep in that role. I just watched a documentary on Tom Cruise on Tubi. Highly recommend it. But he was getting kind of typecast as, Tom Cruise type roles. He kind of acted the same. Even the characters that he played were similar characters. So he really wanted to come outside of his comfort zone, and he did Interview with the Vampire. And even Anne Rice thought it was a horrible mistake, but he proved her wrong. And she, she took it back after she saw the movie. He was great in that role. He transformed himself. Eddie Murphy kind of feels like Eddie Murphy in this movie. Also, Wes Craven has disowned this movie, or when he was alive, he disowned it. That's not to say that, he doesn't take responsibility for the movie that he did, but it's just not a movie that he's very proud of. He said the lesson he learned from that was when you're doing a horror comedy, your first objective for the audience is to still keep it scary. Like Scream. He did Scream right after this movie, and he had the perfect balance of horror comedy. And the comedy will work even better when the movie is scary, like the opening of Scream. The comedy in that movie is placed so perfectly, and it lets the viewer have a breath of fresh air while they're waiting for the next scare to come about. There's very little in this movie that's scary at all. It's more campy than anything. Eddie Murphy plays a few different characters here like he has done in the past. He plays this like Italian mafia type guy that's pretty much a forgettable role. He plays this preacher character which feels completely out of place. And there's a scene where he's going in there and then all of a sudden he's surprised by his reaction because, it's a Catholic church and crosses and all that. But you're a vampire. Why in the hell would you go into a church anyway? And I'm going to be honest. Going into this movie, I've never really wanted to reach out and watch Vampire in Brooklyn just because I wasn't a fan of Eddie Murphy's later stuff. I guess pretty much everything he did after the 80s. He definitely had some stinkers, and I kind of gave up on it. This bombed royally at the box office, so I kind of just pushed it off and said, okay, it must not be that good. It has gained a cult following ever since, and it does feel like its own thing, and I have to give it credit for that. I can see the cult likability of this movie. I think it's only okay. It's not a vampire movie that I will constantly go back to. I watch a lot of vampire movies. I think there's some really good ones still to this day that are being made. The genre has so many different avenues that it can take story-wise. So I don't know why they keep telling the same Dracula type story. I like when they venture out and do something different. Kind of like what they did in 30 Days of Night. And then you had the vampire movie that was on the plane. Can't remember the name of it. I'll put it right here. So straight up, I'm going to give this movie a humdrum. Right down the middle, okay? You can see the cult quality of it, but I don't think it's like, stands above the pack as far as like 90s vampire movies. There's so many good ones in that decade, but I am definitely glad I finally watched this movie. And thank you, Bronson, for requesting this one. And by the way, guys, become a Drumdums patron, okay? Love my patrons to death. They keep me afloat. And of a certain tier, you can get a review in your honor like Bronson did. And I'm finally doing a review for Peeping Tom. That's a patron request from Thomas Jones. I'm so looking forward to that one. That's a movie I've been wanting to review forever. It's a groundbreaking slasher movie, Peeping Tom. So I'm really excited to finally cover that one. So look for that. Anyway, guys, be sure to come over to Killer Flicks where we talk horror all day and every day on Fridays. We do free for Fridays. Follow me at Drumdums on my social. Support me on Patreon. Buy me a coffee. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Have a good day. Drumdum out.